two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Hey!
This is the...
Good morning. This is the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 2nd of September, 2000, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin Memorial broadcast booth. We always remember Jerry Pippin on the Monday Morning Quarterback. As we look at events, whether they be talk shows, at one time we were doing talk shows, now we do events. Let me bring you up to date on a number of things. Hurricane Dorian is now hitting the Bahamas as a Category 5 storm. That is as far as one can go on the scale. The Prime Minister of the Bahamas made a statement to the BBC regretting that some people did not, in the interior of the islands, did not evacuate. And this will be a very punishing storm on a country that is performing as many emerging markets but not performing as well as others. So we look to the impact on the Virgin Islands. The Virgin Islands also, but on Jamaica. That is where it is now. Again, Hurricane Dorian is a Category 5. It will be slowly moving, and these storms normally do move very slowly. We talked about it on Friday Jobber and also on the week that was. And we went into some of the climatic problems here from the Oceanic Administration, the Hurricane Center in Florida, and they also expect the storm to be moving towards the coast of Florida, and winds would be at roughly 150 miles an hour or so if it lands, or it doesn't land, and it could skirt towards the Carolinas and Georgia, the coast there. Very, very difficult to track this type of storm, so we'll have to wait and see. We're on Monday, and it should arrive sometime on Tuesday, because it is very, very slow moving at about 45 or so miles per hour there. So another major situation, a major social and economic damage to the nations that it is plowing through, and at the same time to the state of Florida. It missed Puerto Rico. They got the rain. But you're talking about almost in terms of U.S. measurements, 18 to 24 inches of rain, a lot of rain coming all at once to Florida. So you'll have some flooding going on in Florida. Evacuation orders mandatory for certain parts of Florida that are out there. In the state of Texas, we have another tragedy, this time in Midland, Odessa area there. A gunman, evidently, so far the toll of death is at 7. About 20 people have been killed. The normal response from the governor, Wheelchair Abbott, basically saying we are studying the situation. Now, this is one of the concerns that citizens have across the 50 states. This whole idea of, are you safe? The answer to that is absolutely not. You're not safe in any of the 50 states in the USA. You're not safe in whether it be Detroit, or whether it be El Paso, Texas, Midland, Odessa. G.W. Bush came from Midland, Texas, an oil region. It's a rural area, and that is the hard facts. The NRA and several law enforcement operations would have people believe that they can, quote-unquote, be safe. That is not, that is fiction. It's silly. It's flummery. What happened in the Odessa area when the gunman type arrived in a parking lot of the cinema, people were coming out, some of them armed. But it really didn't bring the situation to a climax. And the reason for that was it was spontaneous. The gunman came out of nowhere. He killed a state trooper and injured some other law enforcement types, and other people were killed, and these are just random shootings. And when you have random shootings, this whole idea of telling people to be safe is just flummery. Absolutely impossible to be safe, because they only have 20 seconds or less to take cover or to move in a defensive position. Now, this particular gunman type was killed by law enforcement. That does happen, that they actually kill the person. But again, this has nothing to do with the be safe situation. Now, what is happening here, the NRA would like to tell people that guns will make them safer. Well, the whole situation here is, and this is where you get into options, or you're into making various options. We'll call them options. And yes, one option is to purchase a gun, have firearm training. That's a viable option, no doubt about that. A prudent person would do that. And at the same time, certain types of gun legislation would restrict the size of magazines. No one needs to be going around with a 100-round magazine, or a clip that is holds 40 rounds, 50 rounds or more. That is not necessary. 12 in bullets will do it, and of course people have multiple clips. As far as background checks are concerned, there's a lawsuit now that has been reinstituted in South Carolina. The murderer Root that killed the people at the historic church there in Charleston. They are suing, and he is, of course, on his way to Indiana, Terre Haute, to be executed. Eventually he will end up there. But the whole idea of a lawsuit moving forward, it will move forward. But if one is not safe in a church, mosque, synagogue, cinema, parking lot, wherever, all these are spontaneous. Period. So you bring these issues up there. You talk about legislation as far as who can access firearms, firearm access by whom. All these are part of options. And these options are open, and they're in the political sphere, and that's how they have to be looked at. You cannot look at this issue as a be safe issue, because that is not possible. You are not safe. And should one take prudent steps? Yes, but you can't take prudent steps driving down an interstate in Texas, or in a cinema parking lot, or in a cinema in a church when someone walks in. Schools now are armed. They have areas that students can go to. They have cameras. They have very sophisticated equipment that is coming. Parents are buying their children armor, body armor. They've been doing that in New York a long time. Bullet type of body armor, backpacks, etc. But when you go to that extreme, you're creating something like Beirut, where a politician or anyone would be literally laughed out of a room or laughed out of a street, telling someone in downtown Beirut at the time, when the troubles there, or in Northern Ireland, to be safe. Impossible. So now the people in Texas, report from the BBC, they are now understand that they are not safe, and Wheelchair Abbott is running out of options. They want action. And this is what happens when an issue becomes to a head, is a very, what they call, basically now with social media, especially on Twitter, that it goes to a virtual issue, that it is on the minds of the people. And once you have things on the minds of people, they teach you in this, in all persuasions, propaganda classes, etc., very little politicians can do about it. There has to be concrete actions. The old excuses don't work out anymore. And this is what's happened to Wheelchair Abbott. People are demanding action from him in terms of legislation that will regulate the types of guns that people are able to buy. Now, obviously, that people already armed with these various things is a different situation there. But police departments across the nation have seized more and more guns. But at the same time, there are literally millions of guns out there. And as people realize the severity of the situation, then they understand what the problem is. If it can happen in a place like Midland, Odessa, it can happen anywhere. Period. And this is starting to create a critical mass. The students have been talking about it from the Douglas, Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. They were touring the nation, David Hogg and company, and were laughed at by some conservative pundits were telling people, just be safe. Now no one is laughing. It has changed. The nation itself is changing before their eyes. And part of this is sets on the door of the White House and DJ Trump. DJ Trump has been literally straddling from one position to the next position. But with every mass murder like this, he has very little wiggle room. Nor does the NRA, nor does these conservative types that have been bamboozling the public. They're out of gas. They now have to do concrete actions. They can no longer study things. They can no longer come with these idle schemes that guns don't kill people, that people do. Well, yes, the gunman there definitely was operating the gun, but he had the gun, and we haven't got all the circumstances on him as yet. But that doesn't create the situation. DJ Trump should declare by executive order a national emergency, and that has certain emergency powers there. Wheelchair Abbott should do the same in Texas, and we've been looking at this from that standpoint. People, of course, are modeling it, that the more of these incidents happen, they will reach a point that the American people will say enough, and these characters that have been out here bamboozling them will find themselves with zero credibility. They'll be faced with O.T. Leo's free strikes rule. You can tell a person once, lie to them the second time, and the third time, you'll complete lunam. You're out of the ball game. Nobody listens to you. In fact, people become angry at you. And this is what's happening with much of this, and we'll continue to monitor. Let me just finish up. Also, a no-hitter by the Houston pitcher. I believe it's Verlander. This is his third no-hitter. The record was by another Astro pitcher, and of course at the time they were in the National League, Nolan Ryan. He did 7 of those in his almost 30-year career. let me just catch a little bit of housekeeping here from the week that was. This was from Karl Rove, was writing in the Wall Street Journal. Biden takes his term into bail, and we'll just go into a little bit of this. Turned to suffer bad press, ultra-critical punditry. We talked about the punditry, his frequent gaps, routinely misremembering, or occasionally weird observations are partly to blame. When he mistaken New Hampshire for Vermont, well, and recalls the Parkland shooting survivors visiting while he was VP. The shooting was in 2018. Well, there's so many shootings out there, and we just talked about that. And this is what's happened. And even such things as on how bad it would have been if Barack Obama had been assassinated after he became Democratic nominee in 2008. Many Americans say to themselves, what the heck is up with this? Well, that was a very, very important question. There were lapses in President Obama's security. I remember there was an incident in Dallas, several other incidents there, an incident out in Colorado when he was making his victory speech, and various other things. He is correct there. It's not what the heck is up with it. It was actually what happened. Yet, let's see, 298 other people also helped put Biden into the barrel. That number of Democrats surveyed in the August 20th Monmouth University poll, but gave Biden only 19% support nationwide, compared with 20% for both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. And he was, 32 in the June poll. Well, polls go up and polls go down. Response Political headline poll. Bernie Warren surged to tie Biden, while CBS News, New York Times declared a three-way tie. Well, yeah, basically statistically, the CNN called it the freeway lead. These were followed by positive coverage of Elizabeth Warren, large crowds, etc. And moving on here, the Monmouth results overlooked that a small sample carries a big margin of error. It was 6 points. That is fairly large. It also ignored 5 other surveys conducted for the week. Well, pundits pick and choose, and many times their particular surveys. He drew an average of, this is Joe Biden, of 29% of support, 19% for Bernie, and 15% for Liz Warren. Very early there. Maybe those 5 polls were wrong and the Monmouth poll was right, or maybe the political junkies were looking for excuse to escort Mr. Biden to the bail and Elizabeth Warren to the spotlight. We remember the spotlighting program that was going on when DJ Trump was running against various characters. Reminded one of Joe Lewis' Chump of the Month program, basically there. And after all, the Massachusetts Democrat has risen in the real clear politics average from 9% on June 1st to 16.1% on Wednesday, while Sanders has grown from 16% to 16.5 to 17.8, and Biden has slipped from 35% to 28.5. Well, that's not bad. Third, national polls matter lots less than polls in states with early contests, largely based on name identification. At this point, national polls can move quickly when voters really start paying attention. With big fluctuations in Iowa and New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, fourth, it's better to look at a pattern in several recent reliable polls than fixate on one. Well, no doubt about that. Polls are easy to report on, and what is much harder to gauge is the quality of each candidate's campaign organization. We know that in Iowa, Elizabeth Warren has a very good organization, so does Bernie. And then, incidentally, while we're on Iowa, the Democratic Party has overruled the Iowa plan to hold what's called virtual Caucasus. An unfortunate situation there. Obama's speech in November of 2007. That was at a Jefferson Jackson dinner in Des Moines that in turn allowed the candidate to beat expectations, gain momentum in what would be a front-loaded contest. Iowa is where Warren is pressing Biden. He has plenty of big-name endorsements there, but she purportedly has built a strong organization in the Hawkeye State. Biden's team is counting by bulking up their staff. Well, now the state's the largest engaged ever Biden supporters. Anyway, he is the most electable. Well, they've been running that. This electability is still widely accepted amongst older Democrats, but there are also younger Democrats out there. So we thought we'd clear that article up there before we move along here to other things here. I think we will talk about the small, this is from the Washington Post, incidentally, and the article is in a small farming town for a football season. This could be in Texas, anywhere it happened to be in Florida, has been replaced by fear of ICE raids. In Immokalee, Florida, whatever it is, anyway, has always been a safe haven there. A tiny farming community, and out in the pure American, for families trying to make it in America. Work in the fields is done, and effort is made to produce a significant chunk of the nation's produce. The whistles and throngs of Friday night game takes over, and the coach there, football is it's only a drug. That's from the Immokalee High School there. But now, after just a couple of weeks before football practice begin, multiple news medias and several residents report immigration and customs enforcement vehicles in the area. The images of unmarked cars were shared on social media as fear is chalked up there. You hear the dogs and the chickens. That's from Danny Gomez, president of the town's Chamber of Commerce. You could not hear a single soul walking. That's how much the fear has encompassed that community. People are scared to go outside. What if you are out and you forget your license, you forget your identification? That is from a senior linebacker named Pierce, who was born here but has been carrying his Social Security card around for the first time. Mother is always at him about having his wallet. Situation even more acute for Latinos and of their families who one person fled Guatemala. And also the raids in Mississippi, 700 people there. Immokalee, anyways, how it's pronounced here is Immokalee. Anyways, almost certainly has enjoyed what it has to offer. More than a third of the nation's winter tomatoes are grown here, and as well as a healthy percentage of its citrus. And if you're a football fan, you've heard of Ezra James, the pro football finalist. A mural of him is near the beaches. J.C. Jackson, who won last year's Super Bowl with the New England Patriots. So some people from this community have made it out of there. Has Haitian stores, Guatemalan stores, Mexican stores, has them all going here at once. So it's a story of all American back in the 80s and the 90s wasn't bad. That's what Gomez said, who was once a migrant worker, but ICE created something different. No doubt about that, where people are literally terrified of ICE people coming and just snatching them up, taking them away. And we just never know what's coming next. Well, no doubt about that. Much uncertainty here. That's why we selected this story. And we'll finish it up here, hopefully. So, amidst all of this, there's a season to play in the Immokalee. Lost its starting quarterback as a transfer in the first preseason game. Ended in an 18-0 loss. So the coach addressed the team, who is Anthony afterwards, taking all the blame on himself. There isn't much time to wallow around here. Winning teams are never predestined, but forget in in setbacks and worries. One of the situations out there, let me just move along here a little bit. We already talked about Greta Thunberg, and the climate activist, arrived in New York. She's 16 years old. We have reported this. This was on the 28th of August by Ann. So this was later on Friday, demanding climate action in 100 cities. Her emanation to grown-ups to tell it like it is. They won her an invitation to speak at the UN, and she used to skip school to do that. Greta Thunberg, 16-year-old Swedish climate activist, has disembarked in Lower Manhattan ahead of a speech next week. That'll be this week after a 15-day sail over on a boat. By rough waves off Nova Scotia. Well, she's in that. Anyway, and the boat anchored off of a Coney Island. That's in Brooklyn. And just before 3 p.m. in Manhattan. And anyway, Norfolk Arena there. And she's going to Jersey soon. Greta, with a smile, disembarked, perhaps on shore of her land legs. Well, she's been on the ship for a long time. To reach New York on September 23rd, she was offered a ride on a racing yacht that used solar panels and underwater generator turbines to avoid producing carbon emissions. So, Boris Herman was a skipper and collected data that allows scientists to study the rate of ocean acidification and byproduct of carbon emissions. A nice picture of the boat here. Some petty person had the audacity to criticize her after single-use plastic bottles were seen on the yacht. If that's what they can get, that's what they can get, period. And she has suffered from various problems, Asperger syndrome, the autistic spectrum. After years of struggling with crippling depression, one of her first victories was persuading her mother, a well-known opera singer, to stop flying. Well, that's good. If you can, you can. Some of these things are out there. Period. And Greta, no doubt, understood how to get it done. To be in the wilderness, the ocean, and to see the beauty of it. She added that I'm going to miss the peace and quiet. She paused for a moment, and people shouted, "We love you, Greta." So Greta has used her skills to organize and do something useful for the world, which is good. Now let me move along here. Something different there. I suppose we'll highlight this. We talked about Friday job. The week it was Tyler Skaggs and his opioid death with alcohol mixed with that, and caused his death. This is in the Washington Post. And opioids, this just means if it can strike Major League Baseball, it can strike anyone. He was a pitcher with the Los Angeles Angels. And basically a mixture of oxycontin with alcohol there, and also the infamous drug and incident. A guy that's written a book about fentanyl here called what is it? Fentanyl Inc. I believe it is. My cheat sheet here is somewhere. And if I can only find it, by Ben Weststock. Anyway, and that was part of the trial out there, Johnson & Johnson versus State of Oklahoma. We have that, and you can tune into that particular broadcast and find some of the problems here with it. It is a drug, and Ms. Westtalk does a very good has a very good book on it, and the various forms that it has taken. It was out in the 50s. It was first discovered. It just takes many different forms. Anyway, his blood alcohol level was not 0.112, and the legal limit is not a 0 point. Basically, it was alcohol there, and of course you had Oxycontin there, and you also had the drug. And this drug takes a lot of different a lot of different forms. Pill forms, you name it, it's there. It has been re-engineered. We'll one day here look at Ben Westtalk's book. It is on my list of things to do. There's an interesting is what is going on with fentanyl. I hope I pronounced it correctly there. Sometimes we pronounce it correctly, sometimes we mispronounce it. Anyway, we'll do the coal miners. Secondly, we'll look at the 2020 elections here. This is from the Washington Post. This is an analysis here of the 2020 election having the smallest number of states. We'll get to the basis of this, and then we'll make some commentary on these states as we our old friend here, Dan Balls, he wrote this. He is a senior correspondent with the Washington Post, been there many years. And we'll just start off in a politically divided nation with attitudes amongst many voters hardened and resistant to change. The 2020 general election could be a contest in the narrowest electoral terrain in recent memory. Just 4 states are likely to determine the outcome in 2020. Each flipped to for DJ Trump in 2016. He won it by only a percentage point or less. And these states are Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Florida. Many analysts point to Wisconsin as a single state upon which the election could turn. Let's start with the states that have significant working class populations. Pennsylvania, if you go out into western Pennsylvania, around Johnstown, that area, and Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan particularly, they have to rely in Michigan on turnout in Detroit. Wisconsin, you have various pockets there of rural areas and also of working class areas there, and again, the Democratic Party has to rely in Wisconsin on the Madison, Wisconsin, where the university is. That whole area, with the exception of some going into Milwaukee, where there's a large amount of followers of O.J. Simpson, African Americans. Florida is a different situation, of course, being battered now. We don't know what will happen there. A lot of Latinos there, African Americans in Florida, out in the Panhandle area. You have more rural types, very conservative people. You have snowfly type characters from the upper Midwest, tend to be more conservative there. So you have a mixture of people where elections turn on less than 1%. In fact, 0.5%. And let me go on with Dan's article here, Shifting Demographics, the growing urban-rural divide, the gap between European voters with and without high school, college educations have helped to create an electoral map unlike those in recent past. So too has the unique profile, he says, of DJ Trump, messaging and appeal. Because of the partisanship of the country and the partisanship of the president, we are now looking at the smallest map in modern political history. That's Jim Messina, who was the manager of Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign, both for the Trump campaign and those of the eventual Democratic challenge will seek to put other states in play. Trump has done nothing to expand his base while in office, while the Democrats claim will make it extraordinarily difficult for him to win states he lost in 2016. Trump's officials disagree. Democratic aspirants, for expanding the rest in part of whether politically changing Republican-held states, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. They've been able to make some progress, in Arizona, particularly in senatorial and House races. In North Carolina is a work in progress. A lot of voter suppression in North Carolina and also in Georgia. States even became very close. Current polling nationally and in some key states show the president vulnerability when matched against several Democratic candidates. Although he overcame a weak approval rating and favorable rating to win in 2016. This is not 2016. One obvious wild card is identity of Democratic nominee and how that shapes in the general election debate. What will that nominee be running on as a platform that moderate voters see as too far left? Will the nominee be able to energize the party's base and still appeal to the working class? He called it European working class. Regardless of who that person is, 2020 election will put a focus on several demographic groups in particular. First, what he calls the European working class, who went strongly for D.J. Trump, an important part of the Republican base. A particular concern of the president will be European women without college degrees. Now, that is a segment of the population that does vote Republican in many instances. Secondly, college-educated suburban women, especially women who have moved decisively to Democratic coalitions who powered the party's gains in 2016. Third, followers of O.J. Simpson, African Americans, particularly younger African Americans whose turnout levels will be critical to the Democrats' fortune. Fourth, Latino voters who play a key role, that is in Florida, and especially in the West. And we're looking in the West at states, Nevada, Colorado. Those are the states there that most, and parts of California. The math of 2020, Trump lost a popular vote to Clinton. We don't have to worry much about that. By roughly 3 million, but won 304 electoral votes and the presidency. Based on current polling, his chances of winning a popular vote are at least as challenging as, well, in 68, forget that. But electoral college is where the whole ball game is. Combinations begin with Florida, then moves to the upper Midwest. One scenario not out of the realm of possibility would be to produce 270 to 268, well, in other words, 2 electoral votes of victory, if he could somehow, if only again, secure one of Maine's 4 votes. If Trump were to win Florida again, Democrats would need to recapture 3 of the northern states, find some substitute. If Democrats win Florida, it would be over for Trump. If one of these 3 upper Midwest states would give him the White House, unless Trump could put something together in some other columns. 3 northern states were part of the 18 states in District of Columbia that voted for the Democratic nominee that was in 1992 and also in 2012, what they call the blue wall. Trump broke through the wall, threading a narrow path of victory. 78,000 votes out of 14 million votes there, less than 80,000. Texera said 3 states were so closely decided that even small changes or shifts there, no doubt about it, demographics, what have you. States like Minnesota will have less in terms of numbers out there. How that plays in, we'll see. While many Democrats are optimistic that the gains in 2018 would foreshadow success in 2020. Reported this year by Catalyst noted it's not safe to assume that Democratic gains, no doubt about that. from 216 to 218 will hold. Midterm elections sometimes are not very reflective because all the creatures that lurk in the night come out in presidential years. More with many years, however, growing polarization has created red and blue strongholds with bigger and bigger victories. In 2016, with narrow popular vote margins, more than 2 dozen states were decided by margins of 15 or more votes. In 1988, while the popular vote margin was 7, there were just 18. The electoral map is never truly static, for long, no doubt about that. But for Democrats, the blue wall, they were a so-called Republican lock on electoral votes. Remember, no doubt, that Dan Ball's points to California, Illinois, and Jersey were battleground states there, no longer there. Tricky Dick, Missouri, now considered a bellwether state. Trump won it by almost 20 points. During 2 elections won by Barack Obama, Virginia and Colorado were in it. The tipping points. The data Democrats gained among college-educated voters have moved significantly towards the Democrats. Now, a note about college-educated voters with certificates out there and various other things. It'll be very interesting. More people are going to college now than have in the past, exception of the baby boomers that came out at the end of the war. And those people are my age and above me. Quinnipiac survey in June showed Joe Biden leading Trump in Ohio by 8 points. Well, Ohio, the problem in Ohio that they have is the Democratic Party organization there is very weak. Although Sherrod Brown did win re-election, he's from the Appalachian part of Ohio. If the president is trailing Ohio by that margin in late fall of 2020, his re-election prospects would be doomed. There's no doubt about that. A Republican basically has to carry Ohio. Barack Obama carried Ohio twice, but he was a different kind of candidate. Florida has been ground zero in presidential politics for 2 decades. G.W. Bush stole it with 537 votes in 2000. Barack Obama carried it by a fraction of a percentage point in 2012. Trump won it by slightly more than a percentage point in 2016 and 2018. Gubernatorial and Senate rates there were decided by a margin of less than a half percentage point. In other words, 0.5%, less than 0.5%. So much closer there. How about President Obama won Florida in 2018 over John McCain? Anyway, Florida is the most complex and costly of the major battleground states, and for Trump it is the most important state in the country. Only Florida constitutes its own region. Its importance was highlighted by the decision to open his campaign in Orlando. Well, Orlando is a little different situation there. Unlike some other states where Trump produced different regional margins, but past election voting patterns in Florida more closely follow those of 2012. Unlike other states, Florida was a state where both Trump and Clinton got more votes than Willard Romney and Barack Obama in 2012, but yet Barack Obama still won Florida. In 2020, the issue will become who comes out to vote, and with a turnout election, and Michigan by fewer than 11,000 votes between 212 and 216. Democrats votes badly eroded, with Clinton falling about 300,000 short of Barack Obama and about 75,000 fewer in Wayne County. That is Detroit. Can't do that again. Bitterness lingered amongst Democrats in 2016 campaign, and how it was played out by Clinton's team. There's more Clinton there. Clinton would have won Michigan, no doubt. Democrats make European working class voters who have broken with Trump also add votes in areas where Clinton had done better than Obama. No doubt about that. The racism is out there. Remember Rush Limbaugh calling for voters in Pennsylvania in those areas there. According to Matt Grossman, he's director of the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research at Michigan State University, said that poses a question about the strategy for 220. Is the best hope of returning some traditional Democrats back into the fold, or continue to gain amongst highly educated voters who are traditionally Republicans? So that's interesting there. If you go down Interstate, what is it? The 75 is north from Detroit through Pontiac and Flint to Saginaw, Michigan, but declining populations there have hurt Democrats. With lower populations in Detroit and Flint, that is not enough for winning coalition. That is from Amy Chapman, a veteran Democratic strategist in the state. So, Malcolm County, the birthplace of Reagan Democrats, still draws attention, but is not important to Democrats as nearly as Oakland County outside Detroit, once a Republican stronghold, no longer that. Democrats also have opportunities in outstate areas in Kent County. That's home to Grand Rapids. Jail Ford used to be there, one of the areas of Democrat growth. Other prospects include higher educated counties like along Lake Michigan and Midland in the center of the state. So let me just go down and finish this up here. Clinton held her own in Philadelphia and suburbs, winning the Philadelphia media market by 25 points, roughly the same as Barack Obama. But Trump swept her in other parts of the state. In Scranton, and as Scranton is actually where her parents are from, Obama lost by about 4 points, and that's also where Joe Lunchbox Biden is from. Clinton by 25 in Johnstown area. Barack Obama lost by 25 points, and Clinton by 37 in Democratic area, Pennsylvania. She lost by 13. Barack Obama won by 5. So that is fairly telling right there. And let's see. Terry Madonna, Director of Politics and Public Affairs at the Franklin Marshall College, that's in Lancaster, said he doesn't rule out another Trump victory in the state. And you probably hear the Franklin Marshall polls out there. David Urban, a political advisor to the president in his campaign, predicts that Trump voters will be out in force, but added the president puts a lot of time and effort in Pennsylvania. In 2016, it paid off. And no doubt about that, but there were also other things going on out there. Ed Randall, he used to be a mayor of Philadelphia, and later the governor there, said 25 counties are as clues to 2020, and that's Delaware, Bucks County, that's in Philadelphia there, and Lorraine County, and that's Wilkesboro, and Camera County, that's Johnstown, and Clinton, home to Lock Haven, wherever the hell Lock Haven is. And anyway, that leaves Wisconsin, where Democrats hold their convention. They'll be holding their convention in Milwaukee. Well, the Republicans in Wisconsin, under Boss Walker, have had an opportunity to do a lot of gerrymandering, a lot of voter suppression there. Things have changed there in Wisconsin. Craig Gilbert, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, wrote shortly after the 2020 election, most Wisconsin voters live in places that are trending in one political direction or another, but the state persists in its partisan battleground because those regions shifted over the past 2 decades, and some canceled each other out. Northwestern Wisconsin become more deeply entrenched as Republican territory, while southeastern Wisconsin become more friendly to the GOP. The cities of Milwaukee, Dane County, that's Madison, remain the biggest and most important vote producers for Democrats. Counties in the southwest along the Mississippi have shifted to Trump, but could move back. Clinton suffered fallout in Milwaukee's media market. That was about double that of the state as a whole. Much of the erosion was concentrated on followers of O.J. Simpson, African Americans, in precincts in Milwaukee. For Republican counties in suburban Milwaukee, Waukesha and Ozaki, I suppose that's how I would call it, dubbed the W of O there. Anyway, those there. These counties are still voting Republican, but as much as 16 percentage points less on the margins. That's from Charles Franklin. He conducts the Marquette Law School poll. We always use it. So some of the things out there, this is, we'll go back to this article by Dan Balls a little later. Some see Arizona with 11 electoral votes as possible hedge against a loss in Wisconsin could happen, which has 10 electoral votes, and migration from western states and a growing Latino population. No doubt about that has changed things out. But the big prize is Texas, no doubt about that, with the work of Beto O'Rourke and others, and with the murders that are appearing in Texas, that could bring back moderate type Democrats in the state of Texas. So we have some things we can look at that will in themselves bring change. One thing to remember, the U.S. is in a transitional period right now, and we're in, of course, 2019. 2020 is totally different. Where the economy will be in terms of nations. Argentina right now is in a recession. Germany is going that way. What will happen with Brexit in the UK? Will no deal Brexit will put them in a recession. How long these recessions or downturns will last is a question. What will happen with climate change? The Farmer's Almanac of all people predicting rough winters in the Midwest, upper Midwest station, and also probably in the Atlantic area here we are, and these storms. All these things are part of the transition period, along with gun control, climate change. People at the margins, you're seeing some changes and some rationality even coming in Texas. Be interesting there. A lot of Republican Congress types are resigning, especially in districts where they won by less than 5 percentage points. Could some of those flip? Yes, they could. That's in the House of Representatives. But the important ball game is with the Senate. Some of these Senate seats are flipping. There will give more impetus to whichever party they flip to. If the Democrats can pick up 1 or 2 seats, that gets their margin closer in the Senate. And, of course, in the House, if they have a good year in 2020, that will make a lot of difference. As far as the candidates out there now, if you go with Bernie's always matched up well as Bernie Sanders against DJ Trump. Elizabeth Warren is ahead of him because of the kinds of campaigns they run. And if at the same time Biden, yes, Biden is ahead of him in many of those areas. He can appeal to that quote-unquote European working class because he's from the European working class, as was with Barack Obama. So those are some of the issues that we're going to see if we look at those situations coming up and where the polling is. Now, Iowa and and that's also Nevada, they're going to have to make their various Iowa caucuses. Of course, in Nevada, they had a caucus and a primary. I believe they had 2 going at once. So we'll see. And what happened in Iowa, we had something from the Morning Register. I guess we don't have it up here. But the Iowa primary, Iowa caucus being the first, and on to New Hampshire, all of that could change. And part of the changing there is demographics. Those states are primarily European states, and are they indicators of nations? Oh no. But what is happening when you go to Super Tuesday, all these states coming in there is going to make it much, much harder in the Democratic field for some of the candidates to compete, because some of those markets are like Florida, very, very media markets. Late great Jared Pippin used to talk about this, those media markets and what the media is doing. And there's some of the disappointing trends more and more CNN, ABC, NBC are the ones sponsoring these various debates. Whereas in the olden days, or yesteryears, or whatever, the League of Women Voters were sponsoring a lot of events. So in other words, the monopoly media is not only sponsoring events, they're the ones that are attempting to frame the election. That's one thing that would be very, very important. Is an important situation there. Is not let them frame the elections. Nonetheless, on the 2nd of September 2019, this is Boston Red and the Jerry Pippin Broadcast Center. Happy Labor Day. It's the American style of Labor Day, which they tried to negate. May Day, which is the International Workers' Day, but we'll take it. We have a special program incident coming up on Labor Day, and we'll talk more about the plight of workers, where trade unions are, and we'll have a combination of speakers as some of the progressive candidates out there. Liz Warren, Bernie Sanders, Beto O'Rourke is in that thing. I think we have a little something from Senator Booker. And we have Amy Klobuchar. We threw her in there. She's speaking to the AFL-CIO and her family's struggles as a trade union family. And her mother, of course, being a teacher, was in a union, first time experience there. And Elizabeth Warren talking about her family on an Okie trail of tears, more or less. And then, of course, Bernie talking about his story. So those are some things that we put in on Labor Day with some statistical help there from various sources. Good day.